Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our Steftalks webinar. Today, we will be talking about our new normal, which is working from home. We have two great speakers, Anton and Eric. After the webinar finishes, we will open it up for some Q&A. So please, if you have any questions for Eric and Anton, please write them in the question box on your screen, and we will go over those at the end. And then also later today, we'll be sending out the recording of the webinar and any key takeaways that we want you to remember. That's all I have for now. So Eric and Anton, go right ahead.
Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. This is Eric Gopal. I'm the director of our continuous service improvement organization here with Stefanini. I've been with the company about 20 years in a variety of delivery roles. My input today is just like everybody else's. We're trying to navigate through what we're all going through as a global business community, and I'm here to share some of my firsthand experiences with what it takes to manage remote staff, and hopefully we can have some good dialogue.
Hello, everybody. My name is Anton Lotero. I hope that you all are safe and healthy. I'm Stefanini's Director of Operations in Asia Pacific, and in a regular day, I sit out of our office in Manila, and I provide business and operational guidance to our call center operations here in the Philippines, as well as in China, and our boots on the ground and smart hands throughout the region. Again, welcome to the webinar. First slide. So if you are tuning in today, then I would imagine that you are in the same situation as the vast majority of us, wherein you had to make the decision for yourself and your team to work from home. We are all hopeful, but the reality is we do not really know how long we're going to be in the situation. So it's important for all of us to learn from each other, just like what Eric mentioned, for us to better navigate during these unprecedented times. And what's in front of you right now is the agenda for this webinar, and more like the key pieces of things that we have experienced and still experiencing, and how we're navigating through the fluidity of it all. Do you have anything to add, Eric?
Yeah, I think the overall goal here today is, we all work in probably different businesses. We may be geographically dispersed, as Anton's in Manila and I'm in Michigan, where it's snowing today, which is crazy. But the reality is that while many businesses have had components of remote staff or work from home, we've titled this slide to reference the new normal. And it's kind of hard to determine what exactly the new normal is. And, remote isn't new, but the methodology and, how we've had to make this transition has caused a lot of businesses, all businesses for that matter, to make some dramatic changes in their operating model. And so we're not here to necessarily tell you this is the way it must be done, or this is the tools you must use. It's a pretty brief refresher. We're going to talk just a little bit around what we did as a company. But again, it's not to express that this was the only way it could be done. But more importantly, we wanted to spend some time talking about some of our lessons learned when it comes to, we're all here now. So what does that mean? And what are some of the challenges we've seen in managing, in many instances, 100% of a workforce that's remote? What does it mean as a manager? What does it mean to be a frontline employee to work in this environment? And for that matter, none of us know when this ends. So the new normal is essentially getting us to that point where when we go back to, I guess I'll say, something close to maybe what we had before, what should we do? And are we prepared for those types of changes in our environment as what it means for our business, but also how are we as a business community going to interact and try and maintain our business goals, but really try and focus on what it means to all employees to operate in this new situation we're all dealing with. So I'll jump to the next slide here.
Get right at it. The very first thing that we established, and this was prior to any conversations around lockdowns, quarantines, and work from home, is a command center. We just wanted to make sure that we have a single source of truth that's going to help us navigate during this situation. And just to be clear about the scope of this command center, it's really just a centralized decision-making body that's going to help every organization make those holistic decisions. And it is empirical that we get people into this ad hoc team, those who understands the overall landscape of the business. And it's going to be easier for them to make those decisions holistically if they know exactly what we're doing in every part of the world, for that, at least for our organization. And let me tell you a little bit of a story, and this is a first-hand experience for me. So the moment that we announced that we're going to be working from home, so I've gotten correspondence, emails, chat conversations, phone calls from various department heads, frontline leaders, and they all had plans as to how we're going to transition our staff from being in the office to the new-ish, as I would say, work from home setup. And while I was very happy that there's that level of ownership from top to bottom, especially from our frontline leadership team, I was a little bit worried that there's not much importance that was given to the interdependency of things, that each department is interdependent, that the diminished capability and a diminished bandwidth in one area can actually impact the other, and hence the command center. We just wanted to make sure that we make those decisions that's not going to impact, that's not going to bring a whole lot of impact, or not going to be disruptive to the business. And this command center as well is the single source of truth for internal and external stakeholders, I would say. So we do have client managers in our organization. We have our own internal stakeholders and our executive leadership team, and we wanted to make sure that whatever information goes out, that it's coming from a single body, that the things are happening on the ground is always up to date, and it's coming from the command center team. And it should be a team that's accessible depending on whatever business hours you guys are following. For us, it's 24 hours. We've managed to be able to establish a command center that you can get a hold of somebody, a decision maker, at any point of the day. And any thoughts on that, Eric? You're somebody who's kind of an expert in command center, being seated on one every given day. So what do you think about the methodology?
Here we are. If you guys can still hear me, it sounds like I'm having a little bit of latency issue. Anton, can you still?
I can hear you, Eric.
Okay. I'll be right back on my webcam. But yeah, I think the objective here, it's that central point of contact that everybody's looking for. If I picked up everything Anton was saying, I think if you look at some of the state, local, and federal governments, all trying to have some type of command center methodology with the daily briefings and the ability for these governments to provide insight to anybody, trying to add some confidence, trying to add some structure, and trying to add some direction as much as possible. So again, the goal is just to try to establish as much of a regular cadence where a single source of information can be shared.
Thank you, Eric. I feel a bit lonely that I'm the only one facing a crowd. Can you move to the next slide, please? There you go. So the actual transition. So this is something that we all have gone through, and I'm not going to belabor this one. And I would say that probably we've gone through this with varying levels of success and ease, or the lack thereof. So what you're seeing in the map would be the footprint of Stefanini, North America, and APAC. So you'd see those little pink areas right there. It's Canada and Australia. So those are two countries where in majority or almost all of our employees are either working on client sites or working from home. And the rest of the other blue regions, that's going to be the United States, India, China, and the Philippines. The vast majority of our employees are working in the office. But we have a bunch of them as well who's either working from a client site or working from home. So let me springboard from those comments. I think we're in a little bit of an unfair advantage. I would say we're a technology company. So from a technology standpoint, we understand what's out there, the latest and greatest, to make sure that we keep our business afloat. And the other thing would be from a work culture standpoint. That's why I've been saying newish earlier, because while this is a buzzword for now, this is not anything new at all. This is something that we've been embracing as a company for a good amount of time now. And looking at shifting the people from being in the office to working from home is just a logistic issue. It's a matter of just packing the machines and sending it home or bringing it home. And that's not where the heavy lifting is actually happening. And I think what we need to do all the time, and it's on the left portion of the screen, I mean, the pre-work, that's where the heavy lifting happens. From a technology standpoint, we always need to review our technological capability on, what are some of those requirements that's going to allow us to work remotely. I mean, for us, I'm not saying that it was easy, not at all. For one, and Eric mentioned this earlier, we didn't really plan to have like 100% remote workforce. So we also kind of struggled in getting those number of VPN accesses to give to our people. The other thing that we need to keep tabs on would be the capability of our employees to work from home. And I can speak for Manila. There's only like about 91% of our workforce who does have the home infrastructure to work from home. And those are some of the things that we want to make sure it is on file, so that at any given point, we can pull it up and say that that's probably our bandwidth capability, depending on any given scenario. I mean, maybe COVID-19 or some other things in the future. Hope not very soon. And depending on what business you're in, you're going to have to review your desktop and laptop ratios. I mean, for any BCP DRP scenario, just make things a little bit more easier if, we have this good ratio of desktop and laptops. And one thing that some people, I'm talking to friends that they might have neglected in the planning process is recognizing this entire setup, this entire shift is going to bring a whole lot of volume and a whole lot of bandwidth requirement for our service desk. It's something that we need to bolster. There's going to be a whole lot of things that you're going to be receiving, from image issues, machine setup issues, and connectivity issues, and it's gonna flawed your service desk. So yeah, those stuff from a technology standpoint, among other things. And HR as well. Needless to say, we need to keep the HR records up to date all the time. We wanna know where our employees are. We wanna make sure that if they're in hotspot areas, especially for COVID-19, that if we're required to send them help, that we can provide help. And the machines that they brought home, it can break, and we wanna make sure that we know how to get those things to them, because they cannot travel into the office. And technology can fail, people can fall off the grid. We want to make sure we have their mobile number so that we can check on people and just check on their general wellness overall. And operations, I would say operations is the team who kind of deal with a whole lot of fluidity. They should be in charge of communication, both on internal, external stakeholders, our employees, and let everybody informed, make everybody informed of where we are with our BCP process. And speaking of BCP, and they're in charge of service continuity and some creative solutions. I mentioned earlier, only 91% of our people, 92% of our people can work from home. And we're going to talk more about creative solutions in the succeeding slides. Any comments on this, Eric?
No, Anton. Again, the goal isn't necessarily for us to spend all our time talking about what we did, because everybody on this call and every industry had to go through a significant learning experience to get to where we are today. So the reason Anton was bringing up some of those comments around laptop to desktop ratio, HR awareness, is there's a lot of things that we didn't have to operate thinking about, but now we do. So going forward, I think we're going to see a much more distributed workforce. I don't think there's any likelihood that all companies will return to the same model we had before. So those bullet points, there's a lot of detail behind those bullet points, but it's something to take away and think about as it relates to maybe how your team or how your company might have to adapt future business practices, whether it's around continuity, whether it's around reaching out areas, whether you're a global or local company, and keep those things in mind. So the reason we added those bullets was to just give you that takeaway so you can think more about those things. But first and foremost, when you get to the operations and the HR side, we're truly talking about people. And the main crux of what we wanted to spend the next few minutes talking about is people. There's a lot of talk everywhere on social distancing. And basically, if you think about what that term means, is it's separating people from each other. And for the most part, there's some effectiveness behind that. But what we don't want to do is, I guess I'll call it personal distancing. Well, we can be socially apart from each other. We can't separate, we shouldn't lose the personal connection that we have. So the technologies are there. Here we are on this webinar that's giving us the opportunity to spend time talking to you virtually. But if you are a team member and everybody has a boss, to some degree in terms of what it means to work in this new environment where you may not be connected to your team in a face-to-face basis. You may not be working side by side as you were before, but it's important that you, that employee, now and ongoing, it's important that the expectations that you have to operate in this model are clear to you, and likewise, you are giving clarity back to your manager with what you are expected to do. It's confusing. It might even be, in many instances, extremely stressful. You might think that you're being watched more, or your productivity is under higher scrutiny. Maybe that's the case, but the important thing throughout this is to make sure that you and your manager are still in sync. So keep those expectations clear. I don't think there's any bad expectation to say that you need to be even in more contact with your manager if that's not the case today. There's a lot of things that are expected to run a business, to operate in a business model. And if there's challenges, everybody's working out of their home office. So we got this truly new dynamic around what it means to work from home if you weren't today. So, keep that in mind in terms of making sure that you are clear with your manager what your expectations are. And it's okay to ask, am I meeting them? Or if you're having challenges, you feel like you're not being as productive as you could be, make that phone call, make that Zoom call, make that Teams call. And then while you're working in that home environment, it's important that you're trying to emulate as much as your business environment as you can. So I'm in this little kind of set aside room right around the corner. I think my son's painting his room and there's laundry going on. So you're not going to avoid those things. And that's not something that you should be overly stressed about. But the environment that you work in, it's important that physically that it's accommodating to what you need to do. Try not to work out of your bed. Try not to spend too much time on the couch. Try to get yourself in somewhat of a protected area so you're given some time to focus on what your day-to-day functions are where possible. I think the one thing that we've learned in this new environment is that we're kind of inadvertently getting an opportunity to see a more personal side of everyone being in their home office. So, again, everything we're saying is everybody's going through the exact same thing. So, keep that in mind, but your environment is important. And then for sure, in all instances, connection to your team, your teammates. One of the things that we know, the reason I mentioned personal distancing is you don't have that ability that you had in the past to be able to have those kind of walk by conversations and have that dialogue back and forth where you're just able to say, here's what I think, what do you think? But one of the things that I've noticed that we've lost is that, oh, what about this? Or one more thing type conversation. Today, you might have a video call, or you might have a instant message, and then you end it, and then you move on, and then, oh, I have one more thing I wanted to talk about. Well, then you got to go through this technology means to get back in contact with that person. And they may have stepped away. They may not be readily available to where we've really lost some of that instant communication opportunity. So as much as you can through all your technologies, stay in contact with your teams as best you can, but again, keep acknowledging we're all in this thing together. Anton, do you have a few comments on those bottom ones?
Yeah, very good point, actually. One thing that we need to embrace during this time is the fact that our new working environment, like Eric mentioned, is not as controlled as the one that we had in the office. So disruptions, it's going to happen. That's one of the bullet points right there. It's going to happen. I mean, maybe the dog barking in the background, as we were just talking before this webinar, or the lawnmower, or your kids walking into your meetings. I mean, these are things that we'd like to minimize, sure, but are these things that those that we need to stress on? I mean, there's plenty of stressor around us. I mean, do we need to add one more? The answer is no. In fact, I think it's a good opportunity for us to connect with our people on a different level, and not to be creepy about it or not to romanticize the situation. It's not great, but peeking into a bit of that life of our people and what it is, just looking at their backgrounds, we might be able to pick up certain things. It's really a good opportunity for us to build a connection that's a little bit more closer, a little bit more intimate, I would say. And the other thing there I'd like to pick on would be, preparing and getting dressed, and I'd like to share my personal thing about it. And you've heard quite a lot of examples as to why you're going to have to do this, COVID-19 or not. I mean, if you're working remotely, you're going to have to get dressed. For me personally, it's more of that trigger for that mental separation. And what does that mean exactly? I mean, in this new environment, it's easy to get lost or lose track of things. I mean, whatever line that separated work and life before is almost non-existent. It's a little bit blurry, murky at best, I would say. And the way I'm dressed is more of my mental trigger for me to know what's important for me at any given time. It keeps me mindful. Every day I get dressed, I kiss the wife and the kids, and tell them, hey, I'm gonna go to work. And then my son would tell me, all of us are creatures of habit. His 6-year-old in August would say, hey, Dad, have fun at work, as he would normally do at any given time. I mean, in regular days. And of course, I go to my workspace. It's a shorter commute. It's a few steps away from the bedroom, and then and then I start working. And then all of the things are gonna come in. I mean, because of the lack of the physical separation, so life and work's gonna throw a lot of things at you. And I'm just gonna look at how I'm dressed. If I'm dressed with my office attire, and it means that my priority is this is how I'm going to do things as if I'm in the office. And the reverse of that is if in my home clothes. I mean, I'm going to make the prioritization based on what I'm wearing. I'm at home, family is important. Not saying that things cannot merge, they do all the time, but at least it keeps us mindful of what's important during that given period. And it allows me to transition to the last bullet point. Not going to belabor it. Stay mentally and physically aware. I'm just going to simplify it by saying that let's not get into the rhythm or just the simple muscle memory of sleeping, eating, go to work, binging on Netflix, that kind of stuff. We're going to make sure that we somehow remain physically active. And if we're living with family, let's not close the door, lock ourselves up, put a D&D on the door, and forget about everybody else. We want to make sure during this time that we keep our family on our good side. It's less likely for us to be successful in this scenario if we don't have those that are important to us in our good side. Just some of the comments that I have for that slide.
Thanks, Anton. So the other side of that is, what does it take to be a manager? For those of you who might be in management roles, are you kind of leveraging some of the best opportunities to make sure your employees are taken care of while achieving the business goals? And again, similar to the last slide, we certainly know you can share some of the questions that you see here. You probably thought many of these things, maybe you've been asked some of these things by your staff. But real quick, just to kind of highlight some of the objectives here, is it's the same thing as the employee. Expectations continue to be something you want to be really cognizant of. As much as the business environment has changed, the business still needs to run. But that doesn't mean it's everything is equal and there should be no disruption to the business model, because clearly there are. But in terms of expectations, if there are things that maybe have become ambiguous in terms of what might be expected in this new model, take an opportunity to evaluate them and prioritize what's important. They can be the exact same ones you had before, but make sure they're clear. For example, in our industry, we spend a lot of time. Time is important, being a service provider, and in many instances, being on time is critically important. So in this environment, being late, for example, we shouldn't lose that sensitivity to what it means to be late in our business operating model. So understanding things are going to happen, but it's okay to impress that it's still as important as it was before. Maybe some of the things around a dog barking in the background isn't as critical to be laying as much expectation on, but make sure you're clear on that. And then the cadence of communication is probably one of the things that is as easy to be lost in all of this. Me personally, I struggle with it as well, because I've lost that in-person contact, kind of old school, where I spend more time in the office and remote. So I'm having a little bit of a challenge trying to make sure I'm reaching out to everybody as much as I can. Probably not that great at it, but it's important that when you do make contact, that you have an objective, but you're also acknowledging the situation that they're in, and communicating maybe a little bit differently. Make sure in your communication that you're also talking not about business. Make sure you're getting an opportunity to relieve some of the stress together, and give those opportunities for your team to be able just to express what's going on. But they can't do that, and you can't do that unless you have a cadence, unless you have some methodology to stay in contact. And then finally, for the part I was going to cover here is, nobody knows what's going on. When we say, who are the experts? Who are the experts? A lot of us are going through this together. We keep hearing that as we'll get through this together, but it's important that that command center methodology that we talked about, our CEO is giving us weekly updates. Our owner is giving us bi-weekly updates, and those updates aren't necessarily explaining exactly every component of what's happening in this global environment, but they're giving us some confidence that, look, all reaches are together. If they have questions they can answer for us, they're willing to do that. I think all of our employees are looking up to try to get some structure and some confidence in what's expected. And you don't have to be that expert, but you need to be able to at least give them the confidence that you are going to do the best you can to give answers where as much as you can. And that's where HR and the executive teams come into play to make sure that if you have stresses that are bubbling up to your level, make sure those get up to the levels need to help you address those issues as well.
So I guess it's my turn to talk about the leadership style. From a leadership standpoint, I don't think that the core value or our core values as leaders should really change a whole lot. I think this is the time that we just need to favor a little bit more, one aspect of our leadership skills, and that's our social skills. As they say, this is the rise of the social leader. We just need to be a little bit, and it's not a whole lot of change. We just need to be a little bit more trusting. Understand that everybody wakes up every day wanting to do the right thing. Nobody wakes up and say, "Hey, I'm going to screw things up today." I don't think so. I mean, everybody's out there, and everybody would like to do the right thing, and that's for for sure it merits some of the trust that we need to provide to people. And this is also the time to be present more than ever. I mean, it's a good pillar in fish philosophy for those who are familiar, and we need to be that constant that people can go to, the constant that is going to help them navigate through these things, and the constant that's going to remove the roadblocks and whatever impediment to success that's lying around. I mean, we need to be the person that they can go to all the time, and while doing so, we need to express more empathy. I mean, we don't want to be that leader who, because for sure we're going to observe that some of our people are going to be a little bit more disconnected, and some of our people are going to be probably a little bit more less productive. And we don't want to be that leader who's going to flip an email showing a comparative analysis of how you were performing pre-COVID-19 and during this period. I mean, we're going to pick up the phone, or we're going to want to do the video call and let them know that we care, that we worry about them, and if there are things that we can do to get them back on track. And then we probably deliver the observation afterwards. I mean, to Eric's point earlier, there's still some business expectations that we need to cover, but the ways of our communicating, the ways that we're leading our team, we just need to be a little bit more empathetic during this time. Have fun. I mean, there are two things to this. One, we're going to have to be a little bit more sensitive in our efforts to have fun, because some of us, depending on which company you're in, I mean, there's a whole lot of stress and people thinking about their employment. So we need to we need to recognize that the situation is hard, and we need to be sensitive and trying to have fun. And number two, we need to project a good semblance of normalcy as well. That's the flip side of it, right? That whatever it is that we're doing in the office, your rewards recognition, the way we gamify things, the way that we play, I mean, those things are things that needs to continue. I mean, we just need to overcome the monotony. And for my team, for example, what we've done is we've done poker nights. I mean, we've done Friday night poker and Saturday night poker, and it was fun. And the team right now in North America and APAC, we're preparing to launch our esports, and I think it's a great thing for people to be connected in different ways, and it's a good team building effort as well. So there's plenty of ways to have fun. There's plenty of ways available to us to use the technology that we have currently to develop those team norming activities and just generally release the stress, I would say.
Yeah, I'd say one of the coolest things that this situation is kind of giving all of us is, Anton mentioned esports and gaming. We're seeing a lot more creative ways where employees or even just friends can get together. We've hosted trivia nights here where we've gotten people together and ran trivia. I know that some people are doing virtual painting classes or some cooking events, as well as just just after hours getting together. And it's really cool to see that. And personally, I think that's something that we've all learned, that there are different ways of connecting outside the office, and there is a greater sense of community that's happening in a lot of our groups and teams, that it's interesting to see how these things unfold. So definitely take advantage of those. And I don't think there's a wrong way to go about it.
Right.
The technology enables a lot of this stuff for us.
And there's one thing, Eric, that my wife shared with me earlier today for their own company. So they have this sip and go spelled as, Van Gogh. So it's a session post work, of course, that they have their wine and somebody's teaching them how to paint. Just very simple stuff. I just remembered when you said, painting online. It's very cool, I think. If it involves wine, it's cool, right?
So we're somewhat running up against time. So just going to cover some high-level bullet points on this next slide, and there's only just one here left to get through. But again, from a takeaway point of view, the collaboration is something that we're highly learning ourselves around how the best way to do it is. But for sure, I think the one thing that we really emphasize is video. As much as we'd like to be able to stay in contact as much as we did before, video is incredibly powerful. Just be able to make eye contact indirectly, but still being to have the opportunity to look at that nonverbal side of what we do. But most importantly, is just still having that direct connection. So as often as you can, even if it's just a quick phone call, leverage the video as often as possible.
It's a good way to show emotions, at your point, Eric. And it's, from a visual audit standpoint, I mean, it's also a good way for us to look at how our people are doing. I mean, we can look at their general wellness somehow by using the video. And, just a great tool for connection. That's your point, Eric.
And then in this slide, we got these little fire icons out there because there's things to be aware of. We've talked about a lot of the things that we should do. And again, just talking to the business community as we would in any type of other forum, just some opinions, some suggestions that we think, might benefit your organization. You might have dozens more that we haven't talked about, but some of the pitfalls or some of the things to be aware of are listed out here. Much more than this webinar could potentially cover, but the whole work from home or remote, there's a lot more components that require some deeper attention, probably some more discussions, and probably a lot of great information on the web when you're dealing with cybersecurity and some of the technology issues that we have. But I think the great thing about this is day over day, we're all seeing new things come out. We're seeing different things on the news and on the web of how technologies are adapting faster. So as we get to this new normal, there's definitely going to be a rapid technology digitalization. I read something the other day where some companies going digital, what might have been a year-long journey happened in a week and a half.
Right.
So that's going to continue to evolve, and I think it's something that we should embrace. But also, we got to make sure that we're continuing to pay attention to those things that may not have been the significant issue just a month ago.
Some of the key takeaways, as we're wrapping up, I mean, it's on the right side. What we want to make sure is that, that we have that mindset that working remotely can really work and we can be successful. It's an astounding yes, if you'd ask me, if we can be truly successful in the work from home setup. And I know that we're going to come out of it having probably a new perspective, because COVID-19 just places us in an actual tabletop exercise of what our capabilities really are. And coming out of it, I know that we're probably going to modify some of our dealing, some of our models, some of the way we're operating. We also need to continuously challenge our technology, like I mentioned earlier, and review our BCP all the time to make sure that it covers the vast majority of things that we can expect. And from a communication standpoint, we mentioned earlier, we just need to be clear, we need to be decisive, and we need to make sure that we get the roadblocks out of the way, and we need to do all of that in an empathetic way. And there's one item right there. It's under communications as well. It's unplug. I mean, this is gonna sound counterintuitive somehow. We've been talking about connecting, making sure we're engaged in all that. Communication to our clients, our employees, our stakeholders, that's important, but we need to unplug as well and make sure that we do not undermine communicating with ourselves. So we need to disconnect. We need to, with all the things that's happening, we need to just focus and reflect on things, on how we can better the future. We cannot really go back to normal. I don't think that it's a valid statement at this point. Normal is what gotten us into this. So we need to go back to a better world. And, hence the importance to unplug and to reflect on all the things that are happening around us. That's it for me, Eric.
Absolutely. So with that, I think we'll turn it back over to Amy for any questions.
Yes. So how does somebody balance empathy with setting expectations for employees?
That's a great question, and it's probably the reason why we focus so much on the employee-employer relationship. I think the great thing is that from an empathetic point of view is that every single one of us is going through the exact same situation. Now, from a global pandemic point of view and the urgency in which things have happened, and the great thing is, if there's a great thing to acknowledge around this, is that it's affecting all of us in similar ways and in many ways differently, but it's still rooted in the same situation. So it's important that empathy applies, but take advantage of the fact that the struggles that you have or your family has or the business has, that's where everything begins. And that's where, if you can leverage that type of perspective, no one can possibly put themselves in a situation where everything's fine, everything's perfect. And therefore you can't apply that to everyone equally. So take that approach, that be cognizant of what we're dealing with. And I think that perspective, and again, I said it earlier, we hear it over and over, is we are all in this together, but we'll all get through this together. And that applies in many ways. And I think that's the first step in applying empathy to this situation with your employees.
And if I may add to that, Eric, it's important that we keep the balance. But for me, they're not really two competing things. I think they work hand in hand, and it requires a golden thread to tie them together. And that golden thread is transparency. And we just need to one, recognize and let everybody know. To Eric's point, I mean, we're experiencing all these things together. We just need to let them know that we understand the situation and we're there to help. But at the same time, we do have a business that we need to run, and these are some of the expectations of the business. And we need to let them know where we stand from a business standpoint, how we're doing, and where we are in this overall scenario. And I think the overall transparency is something that's going to come across. It's going to come across well to our people.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Do you have any suggestions of team buildings during this time while we're all remote?
Yeah, for sure. I think it goes back to some of the examples we talked about earlier, and those are just a few. But besides the inter-business, inter-day type communications, take advantage, and it was just a couple lines on a slide, but to have fun, it's incredibly important. It's not easy to have fun right now, but it's still possible. So like Anton mentioned, the esports or the trivia nights, it doesn't take a ton of coordination to get a gang of people together. And the technology is probably the one thing that's least limiting right now, with the size of Zoom meetings and the different technologies where we can connect people in person or on screen or at least verbally. The opportunities are limitless. We mentioned virtual cooking or virtual painting, just gaming and just staying connected. Some of the things that I thought my kids did, which I thought was kind of crazy at the time, is they would just walk around with their phones and set them up in their room and just spend hours together with their friends. Maybe that's not what we're dealing with here, but that type of connectivity in terms of literally anything that you did before in person, there's still some type of angle that you could do that as a team. So be creative, but explore as many technology opportunities as you can.
Yeah, just to have more of those how goes it type of meeting. I mean, it doesn't have to be all business like Eric mentioned. I mean, personally for my team, I have an hour meeting every Monday. It doesn't have any agenda, but it's just right there to compensate for, all the walk-ups, all the hallway conversations, all the water cooler conversations that we're kind of missing at this point. And it sparks ideas and it sparks creativity. And in fact, it's one platform that allowed us to run some of these fun at work activities that we're doing right now. So just stay connected and make sure that it's not always about business, but more importantly, it's always about people and how we can better engage people at this time.
I have one more thing to add. So some people are really striving at being at home and working remotely, and they're enjoying it, having the freedom to be at home more than they're looking forward to actually going into the office. So when we do get, when our governors do lift the order that we can go back into the office, what are some either takeaways or tips that you might have that will translate to get us more motivated to go back into the office?
Anytime want to take a first run? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think for me, one thing that I'm going to emphasize on, and this is one thing that I'm observing from a productivity standpoint, there's not really any drop in productivity and whatnot. So people are doing the right thing even if they're not watched. So that's one behavior that I'd like people to carry forward back in the office during this time. And we're kind of used to work in a structure, and we have managers, we have leaders, we have all sort of those hierarchical positions. But during this time, I mean, everybody's stepping up to be their own leader, and I think that's just one behavior that everybody should be carrying in the office, and everybody should be one proud of, and everybody should be excited to go back in the office because they know that they can lead themselves.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly, Anton. I think the reality is that the reason we called this session again the new normal is, it's new. It might be normal today, but what we thought was normal a couple of weeks ago has changed dramatically. So I'm sure that the business models of a lot of our companies is going to continue to shift. The digitalization is something that's inevitably here upon us. And I would expect in some instances that the distributed workforces that we're all dealing with will continue. I personally don't see a scenario where everybody goes back to wherever they were before. I think we're going to see over the next several months and maybe the next couple of years a pretty dynamic shift in how our business models are. And this remote thing is forced upon us, but I think we've learned a lot. We'll continue to learn more, and it's definitely here to stay at greater capacity than we ever thought we were going to be at just a couple weeks ago.
All right, perfect. So that ends our webinar for today. Like I mentioned, we will be sending out the recording, and the deck as well will be included in the recording, and some key takeaways. Thank you again, Anton and Eric and everyone joining. I hope that you enjoyed this and you got some tips for our new normal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.